Good evening, everybody. I see you brought a special guest, Joe. I like it. Who is this? Buffy?
Buffy.
Buffy the Buffycorn?
Yeah,
all right.
Soon everybody will walk around with their own Buffy or other character. John has done some pretty profound things. ETHDenver, Opolis, but look out, the best is yet to come.
All right. So let's jump right in. L2s are one of the hot topics here and in the crypto space right now. And you made a bit of an announcement today, so tell us what's new with the ConsenSys L2.
Sure. So Ethereum started out as a modular protocol where everything was in the protocol. And over the last few years, we've seen it non-modular protocol. We've seen it modularize into an execution layer that's getting teased out and a security layer that's more dedicated. And soon we'll see a module for guaranteed data availability and different kinds of data availability. And so data availability is what will make the execution layer really scream, work better, work bigger and faster. In the last few years, we've seen layer 2 rollups, either optimistic rollups or now zero-knowledge rollups, hit the scene and bring greater usability and greater scalability to Ethereum. There are a bunch of projects out there that are taking the zkEVM approach. So we have a project that we're going to launch pretty soon. Polygon has a mainnet launch on March 27th. Scroll's coming. There are other ones out there. And I'm really hoping to see a lot of competition in the space because that makes us all better. But our teams are talking. Our teams are collaborating. And similar to Layer 1 Ethereum, where we had a bunch of competing and cooperating client teams, essentially building the same protocol with uniform interfaces for the developer and user ecosystem. We're hoping to have these projects compete and cooperate in perhaps some sort of unifying protocol as well.
All right. But so just so we are on the same page, the L2 will make transactions faster, cheaper?
Way cheaper, many more transactions per second throughput, way more usable, and it'll enable, because of the number of transactions per second and because of the inexpensive cost for transactions, it will enable far more use cases that currently aren't economically viable on the more expensive, slower layer 1.
Do you have an example?
Games.
All right.
Yeah, just anything that that requires faster frequency of response, and so there are things that we're going to be able to do in layer 2 networks and layer 3 networks and layer 4 networks that are anchored into the lower layer the same way that layer 2 is anchored into Ethereum for security. So one could imagine what we've been talking about for years, which is sub-second transaction throughput. You may not get full finality for those blocks and those transactions, but for lower value transactions, you'll be able to see the thing processed extremely quickly, and you'll get your response back extremely quickly.
Okay, coming back to the L2 for now.
Sure.
Will the L2 be just as safe as Ethereum?
So most of the L2s, or even all of the L2s, will be virtually as safe as Ethereum. They will get 99.9999% of the security guarantee of layer 1 Ethereum. There are things that you can imagine on the edges. So first of all, there is centralization in these layer 2 protocols, and we need to get things out and working, find product market fit for these different products, essentially. and then identify the elements of weakness, slowness, vulnerability, centralization, and fix those things. And usually fixing them will involve creating a decentralization of that functionality. So sequencers, sequencing transactions, for instance, to create blocks is something that will be centralized for a while, but it is absolutely, it's very clear to every team that they need to build a decentralized sequencer.
Okay, and the sequencer, they bundle all the transactions and then sort of send them to the layer one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But I hear you say it will be possible to fully decentralize the L2.
Yeah, so our ecosystem has been progressively centralizing the technology since the start. We need to get things out there and working. We need to build platforms that developers can use and learn what they need to learn to find their own product market fit. In sequences or stages, both the layer one and higher layers and applications will progressively decentralize themselves.
Okay. And you said earlier you will not be the first to market with an L2, with a ZK L2. Do you have a timeline for us?
First to mainnet with a testing network, yeah. Do we have a timeline?
For full?
I think we'll be not too far after our Polygon friends.
Okay. But for the full live on mainnet layer 2?
Yeah, so we might just be in March.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right. Sounds good. Moving on to like the more bigger picture. It's been quite of a wild year last year. So the FTX fallout is still happening. Silvergate may not make it. How risky was and is the FTX fallout for the crypto ecosystem?
How risky was it?
How dangerous?
How dangerous was... So the existence of FTX was dangerous. The demise of FTX was very good news, I think. So first, let me say that the demise of FTX hurt a lot of people, and it hurt a lot of companies. It hurt a lot of projects in our ecosystem, just sort of follow-on cascading effects, and that is terrible. But it would have been far, far worse, far, far more dangerous for our ecosystem if CeFi continued to grow and persisted, and even worse if CeFi had captured regulators and installed regulation that made proper decentralization difficult or unacceptable in certain nation states. So CeFi did some interesting things. It brought a lot of people into our ecosystem, far more than would have been. There are benefits and cons to that. So there was a lot more activity. Our irrational exuberances and surges were way bigger than they would have been if CeFi wasn't so enticing and didn't lower the bar for naive consumers to get into the space. So we could have had a sort of smoother trajectory in the development of our ecosystem without CeFi.
So you're saying if we only had DEXs and decentralized organizations?
Absolutely. We would. So underlying all of these surges and wicked corrections has been essentially a logarithmic curve or semi-logarithmic curve that's been very, very straight, and that means that our ecosystem has been growing pretty smoothly, exponentially, if you look at what we call tech crypto. So tech crypto are the people who think of decentralization as a design principle, as something to strive for and continually perfect or move towards greater decentralization. Money crypto are the people who are interested in separating naive consumers from their money. They essentially glom onto our ecosystem, and they treat decentralization as a marketing strategy, and they don't build with respect or with decentralization in mind. And so, if we were a purely tech crypto ecosystem, we'd have a very smooth exponential growth of our ecosystem. But because people operate by fear and greed quite often, we've had a bumpy road. So that the dot-com boom and bust is very similar. And I'm hoping that that regulators will make CeFi or money crypto much better behaved and protect consumers much better. And I'm hoping that regulators will recognize that tech crypto is just innovation. We're building mechanism, and don't mess with innovation.
All right. You're saying this as a CEO of a centralized company that has banks as clients and investors. So how do you see, like, are you saying ConsenSys will also decentralize at some point, or like how does that go together?
Yeah, so it's 2023. It's hard but possible to be a purely decentralized organization. And decentralization largely looks like mechanism, autonomous mechanism. There will likely always be people either operating in a quasi-decentralized fashion in decentralized organizations like DAOs. There's certainly elements of vertical organization, the way we see in the traditional economy, combined with elements of horizontal organization, which we see in protocols and decentralized organizations. And so that's increasingly going to be the way that, that people operate in the economy. As a company that started in essentially 2014, when there was no ecosystem, we did what we did to initiate ourselves and to grow and to do things that fostered adoption for the ecosystem and to experiment with lots of different applications and build infrastructure so many people could do more experimentation and find product market fit. And then we're on a rapidly accelerating progressive decentralization arc right now. So for projects like Infura, for projects like MetaMask, we're very actively working to decentralize. But
ConsenSys will always be a company, just sort of its projects could be...
So it's 2023, and there are projects that have exited to community or decentralized themselves. I can imagine some of our products possibly exiting to community, even while we continue to play a big role in the evolution of those projects. And I can certainly imagine ConsenSys maintaining its brain trust of amazing talent while making use of the technology that we've developed and we sort of become more natively decentralized over time. I think for quite some time there will be traditional banks and certainly nation-state money, and we will be part of the traditional economy and the next generation economy.
This is not our first rodeo, pun intended. When we talked in 2021 in Hamburg at a conference, you said there's a great divergence where DeFi and Wall Street are sort of moving closer together. Is that still the trajectory, or post-FTX are we maybe going apart a little bit?
Yeah, so ultimately, decentralized finance will just be called finance because traditional finance will make use of these much better mechanisms, and decentralized finance will grow exponentially to serve people and organizations better than regulated centralized finance can. It's going to take quite a while, possibly, maybe not, but regulators in the United States and the United States itself sees this phenomenon of decentralization as potentially a national security threat. The regulators and law enforcement see the technology as something that they need to either slow down or curtail in some ways, or help to fit into the laws of the different nations. And the laws of the different nations are going to evolve in time. So cities used to have roads, and there used to be horses and horse-drawn carriages on those roads, and the automobile technology came along, and there are some odd things, like there's a law where you had to walk in front of a car when the car was moving down the road. And so the laws changed, the infrastructure evolved and matured, and we'll see that.
Do I hear you say the DeFi idea of having permissionless smart contracts where you don't need a bank, you don't need KYC, that will not be possible in the US?
Yeah, 100%. And I don't think that's going to be that controversial. Smart contracts are a mechanism. So you don't want to regulate technology, you don't want to regulate mechanism. Nation states will want to regulate usages of that mechanism. So if you're using it in a way that's clearly not healthy for the citizens, then I imagine that governments will have something to say about that. But I'm much more sanguine about what's happening with regulators, at least in the United States. It sure looks like there's some selfish things happening, either maybe on the bank lobby side, maybe on the regulator side. But I also feel like, hey, there's some terrible projects, some fraudulent, insidious projects, and it's good that regulators are going after them and making people think twice about doing things like that. It's also true that a lot of tokens look like securities. It's also true that many offerings that at first glance don't look like securities are doing subtle things that the SEC, I think, rightly is pointing out are not purely decentralized. So Kraken, big fan of Kraken, but they did offer a staking product that had significant elements of centralization, and they were in control of a lot of stuff, and so that essentially makes it a security. If you advertise your very decentralized thing in such a way that it sounds like people are going to be able to make money based on your effort, then just that language can make it a security. So I actually think that, and this will be a little controversial, I think that Gary Gensler and the SEC are doing a great job of driving projects in our ecosystem to radically decentralize themselves. I could even call Gary the shining knight of decentralization.
Oh boy.
So I agree that there may be ulterior motives, and I'm not a fan of those things, but we need to get very serious about being decentralized full stack.
Is that possible, though? Within a realistic time frame, within a realistic user interface that enough people can use for it to be...
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
The layer one, slow, enabled a tremendous amount of innovation. It's enabled we're building scalable systems. We're building more usable systems. That results in many more use cases. The usability is improving dramatically, and we will. I don't know if we'll ever get to perfect decentralization, but we just have to strive. We have to identify everything that can be further decentralized.
And that is enough to not go to perfect decentralization, but is that enough for the SEC to say, okay, it's mostly decentralized, we're not going to touch it?
I'm not the SEC, but so let's say if the SEC thinks Bitcoin is sufficiently decentralized, that's an interesting bar, because it's not extremely decentralized.
Okay.
And it has a lot of work to do, as do we.
And if staking in general was declared a security in the United States, would that be an issue for Ethereum?
So you can't declare staking a security. You can declare certain kinds of offering around staking a security. Staking can be perfectly decentralized. Projects like Rocket Pool are doing a great job of that.
And it would be conceivable that we can just be have decentralized staking
100%.
decently fast.
In MetaMask, we enable people to, we give them a little bit of assistance, but essentially they're going straight into Lido or Rocket Pool if they choose to do that. So we're sort of like a infrastructure platform like AWS or Azure, and just enabling people to make their own choices and get the yield that they would get otherwise.
Will crypto survive in the US now that the SEC is so adamant about things?
Will crypto survive in the US?
Because there's worry that the industry will just go elsewhere.
Yeah, so
right?
From my perspective, our ecosystem, the broader blockchain ecosystem, and in particular the metropolitan ecosystem, has never been healthier. There is so much innovation going on. There's so much activity going on. You go to a place like this, there are 20,000, 25,000 people throughout the whole event. The pace of innovation is astonishing at layer 2, account abstraction, the NFT space. So again, it's been a pretty smooth trajectory if you squint and you ignore the waves of speculation. So I don't believe that regulators or politicians in general are trying to kill innovation in America. Some of them may be trying to slow it down so that they can catch up, but things are looking reasonably good. There may be a little issue in maintaining bank accounts, but I'm hoping that that's more FUD than actual.
Okay. What will drive the next bull market, assuming there's one?
So innovation, clarity or lack, reduced uncertainty with respect to regulation. I really think that there are politicians that want to help with the uncertainty around regulation. They want to make it hard or impossible for the SEC to regulate by enforcement actions and FUD. And when you have the SEC trying to scare people, it partially means that they don't have anything on people. So if they can scare people into coming in and registering or settling in a lawsuit, that's different from a slam dunk where they have you dead to rights and they sue you or it's just obvious that you need to settle. So that's happening in the SEC context, in the interest rates context, which is, I think, a really big one. I think we're getting close to the end of that particular trajectory, and just the way traditional monetary systems operate, they're going to have to keep printing for a long time, and so We have ultrasound money, so even in the face of the US dollar going down by 8% or something in the last 6-8 months, the Ethereum token was maybe at around 1,000, 1,100, and we're floating around 1,600 in that period. There's a good chance that it was the result of just innovation, solid people, solid teams in our ecosystem that won't be budged. There's also a decent chance that because we took 2 million Ether, I think, out of the regular issuance by the protocol. So 2 million Ether that would have been issued if we didn't move to proof of stake were not issued. And then I think we're around 43,000 Ether that have actually been burned. If that hadn't happened, I think we obviously would have had a less sound money. But we've really had a solid base around 1,200 for quite a while. And when things start to run in terms of excitement and innovation, maybe it's an NFT project, maybe it's the zk system, EVM system really starts to roll, then more and more transactions will cause more and more Ether to be burned, which will get more and more excitement, including from institutional investors. And I think we'll see a very interesting positive feedback loop, and I will put a 23 handle on that sometime this year.
Interesting. I have to point out that Ether also has been at 4,000 and at $90, sure, right? Compared to the US dollar, yeah. I don't think.
So, of course. And let's look at the stock market while you're doing that. So that was partially a result of another one of our irrational exuberances, and tying that with a wicked macroeconomic collapse and geopolitical crisis, and yeah, all the assets are down.
To wrap it up, what projects are you excited about? There's a lot of innovation in Web3 also, so where do you think, like what's exciting for you?
There's so many projects in the Ethereum ecosystem that I'm excited about, especially inside of ConsenSys. So I'm going to go way off script, and I'm going to say the Ordinals project on Bitcoin.
Okay.
I'm partly joking, but I'm also very serious, because if Ethereum goes up, it takes the whole ecosystem with it. If Bitcoin goes up, it takes the whole ecosystem with it. Bitcoin has been conservative in its young life. It was sort of the older brother to an entire ecosystem, and it couldn't really stretch its wings and explore its creative potential. But with this new Ordinals protocol, with NFTs getting minted on Bitcoin, Bitcoin is starting to get its groove. It's starting to get expressive, and I would love to see block space for Bitcoin get really, really expensive, because that'll lift all boats.
All right.
Not the thing I'm most excited about, but
what are you most excited about?
Most excited about ConsenSys zkEVM.
Aha, of course. Bringing it full circle. Thank you so much, Joe Lubin.
Cool. Thank you.
Everybody, enjoy the rest of your conference.